Good evening. My name is Sally Allen, and I am a member of the League of Women Voters of the Ann Arbor area. I welcome you to tonight's forum featuring candidates for the Ann Arbor Public Schools Board of Education. The candidates will be on the ballot in the general election on Tuesday, November 6th. We are broadcasting from the studios of CTN in Ann Arbor. The League of Women Voters is pleased to sponsor these forums. The League is a nonpartisan civic organization that encourages informed and active participation of all citizens in government. The League works to increase understanding of major public policy issues and seeks to strengthen and broaden knowledge about our form of government and democracy. While the League does not support candidates or parties, we do take stands on issues we have studied. One of the League's most important goals is to assist voters in making informed choices at the polls. And thus, we bring you tonight's program. Our moderator this evening is Carolyn Madden, who will explain the format and get us started. Carolyn?
Okay. So there are 4 open seats for the Ann Arbor School Board, and we began the night with the first forum with the 4 incumbent Ann Arbor Public School Board members, and now we will have our second forum with 4 candidates. They give the names. One candidate cannot be here tonight. So let me just introduce our candidates. From left to right is Rebecca Lazarus, yeah. Suzanne Perkins and Bryan Johnson. And Lucas Cole is our candidate who is not able to be here tonight. Okay, so each candidate will have an opening statement of up to 1 minute. Each candidate will have a closing statement of up to 90 seconds. And in between, I will be asking questions which came from the Ann Arbor community. At appropriate times, the timers will hold up their paddles with the amount of time remaining. Yes, and 90 seconds for each of the questions as well. So the timers will hold up their paddles, the amount of time remaining, the 30-second paddle will be up, and then finally a stop sign. And please stop when indicated so that we will have an equal opportunity to hear all of you. The order of speaking was determined by a drawing before we began. And our League members who will help us with the timing are Randy Friedman to my immediate left and then Miriam Shaw. Thank them very much. And now we're ready for our opening statements. Ms. Lazarus, would you please begin your opening statement? 1 minute.
Hello, my name's Rebecca Lazarus, and I want to say thank you to the League of Women Voters and CTN for hosting this great forum tonight. I'm so excited to be running for Ann Arbor School Board. I'm a mother of 2 children who attend Ann Arbor schools. I'm a business consultant with a degree from the University of Michigan, and I have a diverse business background that has, for the past several years, I've been managing multi-million-dollar real estate development projects. I believe that there's an opportunity and a need for our district to have better transparency so our board can be more responsive and more progressive in how we support our students, teachers, and principals. We can do better. I look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Ms. Perkins?
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Dr. Suzanne Perkins. I also want to thank the League and the CTN. I am an education neuroscientist. I have a PhD in educational psychology, and I'm running for school board because I felt that I brought a unique perspective of having a background in educational policy and educational science. I am a graduate of the Ann Arbor Public Schools. I left after graduating from Pioneer High School, and I went to Massachusetts where I did my master's work, then taught in special ed with some of the most vulnerable kids. I came back here for my PhD, and both my kids are Ann Arbor Public School graduates.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Good evening. I'm Bryan Johnson. I want to thank the League of Women Voters and CTN as well. I wanted to just let you know that I'm proudest of the fact that I'm the father of 2 kids, one at Pattongill and one at Tappan, and the husband of a teacher, a school teacher. I have a master's in business administration from the University of Michigan. I'm also a Pioneer High School graduate and a Forsyth Middle School and Abbott Elementary School graduate as well. I currently work at the business school where I do admissions for the Master's in Business program, specifically focused on recruiting underrepresented minorities. I was one of the first to graduate from my neighborhood, Pine Lake on the west side here in Ann Arbor. I wasn't the last, but what I do know is after about 30 years, we're still having a lot of the same issues. The same types of kids that grew up around me are still struggling to get some of the education outcomes that I was able to achieve, and that's why I want to be on the school board. I think I bring a unique perspective to that, and I'm excited to talk a little bit more about it.
Okay, now we'll begin with our first question. I'll begin with you, Ms. Lazarus. So, you're the challenges, and you are facing 4 incumbent board members for a seat on the board. What issue or issues prompted you to seek this office at this time, and how would you accomplish your goals?
I ran 2 years ago, and one of the things that I ran on back then was I felt that outsourcing had degraded the quality of our classrooms and busing services, our food services, and the maintenance of our buildings and grounds. These contracts are coming up for reconsideration, and I don't really feel that these services have been improved much. As leaders in our educational system, we need to provide the very best quality services that possibly can be provided to our students and teachers. If we can't do that, then we need to have the board reconsider possibly different ways of bringing those services back in-house. The security, my children get on the bus, we don't know who the bus driver is. There's no familiarity of who these people are. And the custodial services. Some of our schools aren't well maintained. These need to be addressed.
Ms. Perkins?
Okay, thank you. I'm running for school board primarily because I'm interested in making sure that the school board has policies that are research-based. The school board is in charge of making policy decisions for the Ann Arbor Public Schools and directing the superintendent to follow through with policy decisions. I want those to be research-based, particularly in terms of closing the achievement gap, which has been an ongoing problem in Ann Arbor for as long as I can remember. We need to pull data from the schools and the various programs that we have intended to close the achievement gap and see whether they're working. If they're not working, we need to make changes to those programs to make sure they're to make sure that we are actually closing the achievement gap. I have been an advocate for later school start time for adolescents. The CDC recommends that no school should start before 8:30. It's been about 6 years since they made that recommendation, and we are not fully following it. I think it's a very important policy that we need to follow because it helps with mental health, it helps with achievement, and it helps with physical health. We're one of only 4 states in the country that treats 17-year-olds as adults in the judicial system, and we really need to look at our policies in terms of the school-to-prison pipeline, the inequality in the way that we bring kids into the school-to-prison pipeline. And
okay. Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Thanks. So I've been a resident of the Ann Arbor area for a long time. I've been back for about 12 years, and what that's allowed me to do is to talk to a lot of people who are citizens of Ann Arbor and who have their children in schools or who work in the schools. And what over time, as I was working with different parent groups to either save the tuition-based preschool, or when I served as the president of the district-wide Black Parent Support Group, I noticed the way that the district was working with its parents and with the teachers and even principals, and there's a lot of concern. I think on the surface, our school district looks like it's doing a great job, but if you really start to ask the people that are on the ground that actually see these things happening, there's a growing concern and a lack of trust in the board. A few reasons for that is, for instance, the teachers feel like they're being silenced, like they can't speak up, like they can't be a part of the solution. As we talk about these big issues, we need everybody working towards those things. And when you have a school board that hires a union busting law firm, it's very difficult for your teachers to feel like they're vested in your child's education, or that they're not seen as the bad person. And we understand the impact that teacher performance has on our students. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I've seen, my mother was in the district-wide Black Parent Support Group as well, and we've seen these achievement issues happen based on ethnicity and income for too long. And I'd like to come in and really look at some new innovative ways to change that.
Thank you. Okay, our next question will begin with you, Ms. Perkins. Decades ago, Michigan consistently ranked among the top 5 states in funding for schools alongside Maryland and Massachusetts. Most recently, Michigan is ranked 34th in education funding nationally. So as a trustee, what new or next steps can Ann Arbor Public Schools implement to effectively advocate for additional state funding for K through 12 education?
Well, I'm hopeful that we will get some changes in Lansing. That will make a big difference. We have seen cuts of, I think it's like $1.2 billion, because we've had funding from the K through 12, the school aid fund. We've had higher ed funding taken out of that, and so it's been reduced. It's also various ways in which there's been sort of a death by a million cuts of trying to remove tax money from the school aid fund. So it's a really big issue and something that has to be solved in Lansing, by and large. It's very difficult for us in Ann Arbor to get more funding. In terms of the budget here, I would really like to try to make sure that we put our emphasis on personnel instead of on things like utilities and busing. I would like to work with the city to try to get a bus line that goes from Skyline straight down Stadium all the way out to Ypsilanti and back, so more kids can take the public bus to the high schools, so that we have less buses, and work on initiatives to green the schools, which would help with the cost of heating and electricity for the building. I think there's also an argument to be made for moving administration into the buildings.
Okay, Mr. Johnson.
So what I would do is, I think we all understand that there are funding issues in Lansing, and a lot of that needs to be changed by lobbying Congress in Lansing to return some of the funds that have been diverted from K through 12 back into K through 12. And I think one way to do that is really to energize our public. All politics is local. I think one thing that the board needs to do is be more visible, to be more into our communities. And one thing that we're doing as we canvass is talking about voting in general and really getting more people involved in the process. If we can do that and get more kind of boots on the ground with that, I think that we can impact things in Lansing. I also think that we need to make more partnerships with other school districts that are neighboring. I think if you talk to someone on the Ypsi school board, for example, I think sometimes there is a bit of a push and pull between the districts, and I think we really need to work with them to lobby together and look at our area and how we can help to begin to lobby Congress, as I said, to refund or to return some of that money back.
Ms. Lazarus?
Yes, I have to concur with my colleague over here, Mr. Johnson. The problem does lie, definitely, because the funding comes from Lansing, that hopefully in this next election people will get out and vote to change Lansing out. Some of the policies that some of the governors want to implement will definitely help all the school districts in the area with early education, so that we can catch these children early on when they're fresh, they're ready to learn, and get quality preschools for all students in this area, not only ours, but everywhere in Michigan. I think that as a district, we're a large district. We're, I think, the 5th largest district in the state of Michigan. We need to be out there, public, standing up, being strong, getting other districts locally and working together, trying to partner with them so that we can stand up to Lansing, show that we're tired of all of this top-down push on our districts. We need to take our district back. And I think that working with our teachers, making our vision, our long-term vision as to how we're doing this, how we're trying to fight for them so they have more latitude in the classroom, I think will encourage the parents and the students to stand behind the board and the district and the administration to get these things, to put the pressure on Lansing.
Okay, thank you very much. And the next question will begin with you, Mr. Johnson. Ann Arbor is a town characterized by both privilege and need, with 1 in 4 students coming from poverty, 1 in 10 coming from a home where English is not the first language spoken, and 1 in 10 with needs documented on an individual education plan. In what specific ways will you lead as a trustee to ensure that all students are learning to their highest potential, and so that we continue to reduce disparities in achievement outcomes across traditionally underserved groups of students?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that's really close to my heart. What I understand about education is that when you look at educational disparities between students that have resources and those that don't, there's a large percentage of that disparity is because of things outside of the classroom. When you tend to look at even the highest performing students, they're not necessarily performing higher because of what they're doing in the classroom. They're spending extra time outside. They have extra resources, be it tutoring or SAT prep or enrichment programs. And one thing that I love about Ann Arbor is we have that already in our community. I've worked with a program called Kappa League where we took young black men and we did mentoring. As a lower income black person growing up here, I never saw doctors and lawyers, but they are here. And so I do think that the way that the district can actually help is to start thinking about education a little bit more holistically, thinking about how things happen outside the classroom and outside of the school. So having someone that partners with these community organizations to bring them in. We talk about wraparound services, but where is the proactive action being taken to reach out to these wraparound services? How are teachers being equipped to understand when students need these types of services and to connect them to them? And I think one way we can do that is to hire people full-time that identify these resources that we have in this wonderful city of ours and start to connect those students to those resources so that they're better off overall.
Okay, Ms. Lazarus? Yeah.
That was a long question.
Okay, well, yeah, okay, happy to read it again. Ann Arbor is a town characterized by both privilege and need, with 1 in 4 students coming from poverty, 1 in 10 coming from a home where English is not the first language spoken, and 1 in 10 with needs documented on an individual education plan. So in what specific ways will you lead as a trustee to ensure that all students are learning to their highest potential so that we continue to reduce disparities in achievement outcomes across traditionally underserved groups of students?
I think first and foremost, I feel that we as a board would need to reach out to the community and listen to what the community is asking for. I feel like I've met with many families and they just don't feel like they have anyone to talk to. They don't know where to turn. It's very frustrating. And some of these ideas, we've got a rich community. Our second largest student population are Asian Americans. We should reach out to this community, and I would like to be one of those people who step out and actually reach out to them. They come from many different countries that have very advanced educational systems, that have working solutions that we could bring in to our schools and actually start implementing some of them on a pilot program basis. Several wives, and even husbands are on H-4 visas. They can't work, but they are willing to help and volunteer in the schools. And I'd like to reach out to them to have after-school tutoring programs that we could implement in the various elementary schools and even in middle and high school. So I think we have resources. It's just we need to be able to know where they are, reach out to the community, and be innovative in how we use those resources.
Thank you. Ms. Perkins?
Thank you. Well, this is the issue that I ran on. That's the one that is closest to my heart. When I was a teacher in Massachusetts, as I said earlier, I was a special ed teacher, and I taught kids with emotional and behavioral disorders They were the most vulnerable kids. They came from very high poverty backgrounds. Most of them had been abused and neglected. And most of my work as an academic follows working with very vulnerable kids. The things that you need to do in order to close the achievement gap are you need to identify kids really early, see where they are behind in terms of all social functioning, reading, math functioning, all of those things. You do need wraparound services. You need services where people can go into the home, and for a wealthy district, as you said, we are in a wealthy community. We don't really have those kinds of services to any great extent. The starting school later has actually been shown to be really important for most vulnerable kids because it's so important for academic achievement and for mental health. And we need to really pay attention to whether or not we are diverting kids into disciplinary practices who are on IEPs or who are low income, because that starts out a tracking very early on.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, the next question will begin with Ms. Lazarus. In the Ann Arbor Public Schools, our 34 physical properties, which represent a significant community investment, average 65 years of age. And like many public organizations in Michigan, consistent renewal of infrastructure was deferred during a decade of reductions in state funding. Can you describe the steps already in progress to catch up and keep up with physical property needs in the district? As a trustee, what steps would you explore adding to this body of work to ensure updated, high-functioning, and efficient school buildings, this is a long one, to serve our students today and into the future?
One of the things, we just recently passed a bond, or not a bond, a millage increase to address those shortcomings in our budget. So we do have some funds to work with. However, as a board member, I would like to understand, and I even actually worked on that millage campaign to get the word out to the community to vote for it. I'm not one who likes to raise my taxes, but I see the need for our buildings and the infrastructure. These are our assets. They're not the best assets that our district has. Our teachers are our best asset. But these are buildings that I know people have love, and they have wonderful, fond memories of these buildings and how they went through school. But some of them are very old, and we have to reevaluate exactly, are these buildings and the cost of remodeling them, is it the best use of these funds? Maybe there's other options. We have a lot of land that we can actually build upon new, very green and more efficient buildings. And development is something that I have a little bit of background in, but we should look at that as a possibility to use these funds. So it's important to keep the maintenance of these buildings up, and I think we should look at how we use them a little closer.
Perkins? Thank you. Inefficiency in the buildings is one of the biggest budget items. It's just a continuing leaching from the budget. And we do have many old buildings in Ann Arbor and across the state. I've talked to Gretchen Whitmer about an idea that I have about a one-time plan to green buildings across the state, green the school buildings across the state. I don't know if anything will come of that. I've also talked to various people at our state and state legislature. Here we have in the past used millage money for things like improving the windows and the insulation in buildings. We need to continue to do that because as long as our infrastructure is crumbling, we're wasting money all the time. And it is something that we could try to invest in, things like solar, and these buildings have huge roofs on them, and DTE has a certain number of solar arrays that they are supposed to put across the state, and having them on top of our buildings would be a good way to reduce eventually the cost of running those buildings.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Yeah. So with any issue, I think that you need to understand the problem first, and I do know that the board is in the process of a facilities assessment. So I would really look at what that facilities assessment says. First and foremost, I would look at fixing the things that are safety hazards and that need to be fixed right away. My daughters go to school in Ann Arbor Public Schools, and when I went to curriculum night, it was so hot I can't believe that they go to school there every day. So some of those things where we're talking about cooling and really improving that environment for them in the short term, I think we should definitely look at. But I also think that we need to look longer term. One thing that we've been doing is we have been passing these millages, but they do tend to be kind of stopgaps. It's when we need the money, we ask for it. But I'd like to see a more long-term plan to develop either new construction or, it's funny, Rebecca mentioned buildings and fond memories. We were talking, and I told her I met my wife in C Hall of Pioneer, so I don't want to destroy Pioneer High School, of course, but I do think that we do need to look at ways to renovate or to rebuild or to do new construction so that we meet a balance. We do need to talk to our community to see what they would like to do. I was here around the Skyline construction, and I saw a lot of the passionate outcries around that. So I think that needs to be managed, but we definitely have crumbling infrastructure, and after a while you can't keep putting a Band-Aid on it. You need to look at something more long term.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question, we begin with you, Ms. Perkins. School safety. Mm-hmm. School safety is always uppermost in parents' minds these days. So do you support the district's current policies on school safety, and why or why not?
It's a great question for today. A lot of us are wearing black today because it's a way to say that we believe survivors of sexual assault. Sexual assault happens. The bubble for that is starting around 14 years of age until the early 20s. I think we need to have greater programming around teaching kids what is, where it is okay to touch and not touch bodies, and to have safe places for people to report. I think that we're really lucky in Ann Arbor because we have a very diverse group of people, and we do generally treat each other with a great deal of kindness. We have in the past had a gap in how we discipline people, where, as I said before, that the kids who are on IAPs, kids who are low income, are more likely to be disciplined and sent into the track where they end up in the school to prison pipeline. So we need to look at more restorative justice practices, and we need to really work with kids finding out what places in their schools are safe by finding out from them if there are bathrooms that are unsafe, etc.
Okay, Mr. Johnson?
Great. So I think that, or one of the things that our district has been plagued with is suicides. In the last couple of years, we've seen suicide attempts and suicide skyrocket, and they've really rocked our schools. And I think that that's one kind of symptom of the fact that we need to double down on mental health investment and directing those funds where they need to go. One of my biggest concerns is when I see school shootings, and typically those are the kids who really, they don't necessarily have IEPs. They're kind of under the radar. And I think as we're looking at helping specific kids, there are a lot that get left out. And as we're always kind of focusing on, shrinking budgets and the bottom line from a fiscal standpoint, a lot of these children who, when I was in school, we had, school counselors that were there that weren't just people that worked on your class schedule, but people that could actually look at your mental health. And And that's one of those things that I really think that we should double down on. I think there was an increase in funding for mental health, but some of that went to like additional principals and deans for specific schools. And while that's great, I think that I'd feel more comfortable if we were doing something that more directly worked with kids in their mental health, and helping teachers to understand how to direct them to those resources.
Thank you. Ms. Lazarus?
Safety in the schools, it's really sad that we live in a time where our children have to come home and tell us that they did an active shooter drill today. And my daughter told me that she sat in the bathtub with pillows over her. Unfortunately, I don't think that that's really going to save her from something as an active shooter. I think we need to push back on our legislation to do something about gun violence, and our schools should not allow any guns in our schools or around our schools. And our district has been forthright in fighting that, so that's a great thing. I think that it also comes down to kids need to feel safe in that they know who they're dealing with, the adults. We tell our children about stranger danger, but if they're getting if people who are working in the schools are different every other month or every couple of months, and they don't get to know these people, the bus drivers, the custodial services, it's very sad that they don't know who these people are. So they're not sure who these individuals are. So they don't have that security feeling that they can go to all these adults and know that they're going to be safe. So I think we really need to look at who our children are being exposed to in the district and in their schools.
Thank you. Next question, again, Mr. Johnson. How do you feel about the state legislating for proposed changes to Michigan social studies curriculum?
So I think we're in an interesting time in our country in general, where even facts have become debatable, and historical facts have become manipulated in a way to push political agendas. And I think that the proposals to change social studies is a symptom or an example of that. I think it's really dangerous because as we especially start to look at kind of minority communities, and we seek to empower them or have them feel like they belong in our history and in our society, and that they can do well in school. When you start to sanitize some of the things that have happened historically, I think that works against them. I also think that we need to build on our rich history, and when people start to change that, it's just not helpful for our students. So I totally oppose it. It is hyper partisan. I think it's poisonous in a lot of ways, and I don't agree with it at all.
Ms. Lazarus?
I have to agree with my colleague down there. It is. It's terrible that people are even trying to take people out of very like Helen Keller, Hillary Clinton. I mean, this is just going a bit too far, and we have to stand up as a community and say enough's enough. Stop. And as a district, we have to look at where we're purchasing our curriculum items from, our textbooks, what states are authorizing these books. We should ban any type of publisher that actually is encouraging these types of changes to our social studies curriculum. We have to stand up, and we have to bond together with not only our district but other districts to say, because money talks, and if you're not selling books and you're not selling textbooks, they're going to stop.
Perkins? Yeah.
Okay. The education system has been the center of the culture wars for a very long time. Back when I was getting my master's in education, which was embarrassingly a long time ago, even then, Texas had the biggest they do their textbooks for the entire state, so they have the biggest sales of textbooks, and they make decisions, which is what Rebecca was talking about, at the state level. Now they're talking about removing Hillary Clinton and Helen Keller, but they've done it years and years and years. They've removed Latinos, they've removed African Americans, they removed all these people from the curriculum, and then it's the biggest buyer of textbooks, so then everybody else is forced to use those textbooks. It's happening very clearly in our state because obviously these are state ideas for changing our social studies curriculum. That's where we really need to be standing up to Lansing. We need to be at these, at the legislative sessions. We need to be talking to people. We need to be there telling people that these are terrible ways to control education, trying to take democracy and democratic values out of our social studies curriculum. I mean, it's just abhorrent.
Thank you very much. We're just debating. We think we have time for one more question. And we'll start with you, Ms. Lazarus. What are your thoughts on Michigan's third grade reading law, first implemented in 2017-18? How might you help improve the current district plan given the fact that Ann Arbor Public School receives less state funding than other districts?
I support reading. I mean, I think reading opens the door to the world for any kid, any adult, any child. Having the standard set is fine. How we get there is another thing. I think we need to encourage after-school tutoring to understand and allow our teachers to have more time to actually teach the children in the classroom and understand who these kids are, where they are in their education and their academic performance, and try to not look at them as data through testing, pre-tests, post-tests, quizzes. I mean, I support testing, however, and when a teacher feels that it's necessary, but our district has gone way beyond the testing requirements that our state requires us to implement. I think that we need to catch kids young. I've said that before, in preschool, have quality preschool education, and allow our teachers latitude to be creative and make reading fun. My son struggles with reading, and it took us a long time to get him to love reading. He loves it now, but it took us a long time. So every kid's different. So you have to understand who you're teaching to.
Okay. So the third grade reading law was, I believe, originally started by Adam Zemke, and then, if I'm correct, he didn't vote for it in the end. It was originally a bipartisan idea to try to make sure that kids are achieving appropriate reading skills by third grade, and that is a totally laudable goal. We do, in fact, need to know whether kids are able to read by third grade. But but the law itself is extremely punitive, holding kids back. Holding kids back really never does anything. It doesn't help anybody. It does get into the issue of testing and over-testing. We have a lot of testing that's mandated by the state, and much of it is inappropriately done from somebody who does a lot of education policy. You know, you don't test people in the fall and then not get the answers back until April, when it's useless for the teacher and the parent and the students. A lot of that is state mandated, but another thing that we can try to focus on is getting actually the results back early, because if you do identify kids early, you can do things like reading recovery to bring kids up to speed. But that's where you want to be helping them and not punitive, and the third grade reading law is unfortunately punitive.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Sure. I actually agree with Rebecca and Suzanne on all points. I do believe that, you know, reading is important. It's an important building block on a lot of other skills. Just developing your cognitive ability, being able to read well is really important. But it also starts to lead into academic and social and discipline issues too. When a child can't read, a lot of the behavioral issues are really to cover up the fact that the kid can't read. And so I do believe that by third grade there should be specific standards, but I agree, they shouldn't be punitive. I have 2 children, and one performs a little bit differently than the other. It's very difficult to say that by this time this kid has to reach a certain standard or we're going to hold them back. Holding them back starts to exacerbate the exact problems that I was talking about before. Now there's a stigma on them. Now they've been held back, and they watch their classmates go farther. So I do believe that that it makes sense to not follow that standard. And so the fact that we're getting less funding is great on that note, because we're doing the right thing for our kids. I think that teachers should be empowered to make the types of decisions to help those children get the additional support to catch up, because to Rebecca's earlier point, some kids it just takes them a little bit longer, and you don't want to add additional pressure and additional stigma that's going to work against you as opposed to work for you. So I do believe that we're kind of headed in the right direction there.
Okay, thank you very much for responding to all the questions. And now we'll begin with you, Mr. Johnson, give you the opportunity to have your closing statement also for 90 seconds.
So thank you so much again for this experience. One of the first time I've been on a panel like this that's televised live. So that's a bucket list item that I can go ahead and mark off. I just want to, thank you for this opportunity. I do believe that we live in a great district. I owe my whole life to the teachers and the principals, and one teacher that's actually sitting right next to you, for helping me throughout my career. I do believe, though, that at a board level, we need to set a vision for our district. And if you look at what's been going on, the board has done a great job at approving budgets and keeping their head down and getting things done. But you need a vision. When you start to look over the last 3 decades at least, we're dealing with a lot of the same issues that we were faced with back then. And the reason is that we're not being innovative. And I think that the great thing about our board is that it does change over. About half of it changes over at any given time. And we have the institutional knowledge, but I think that we need more vision. Go on the website for the board and see what the goals are. I looked myself. I couldn't really find very concrete goals or very aspirational goals. And that's one thing that I think that I bring to the table, along with my 2 running mates. I'm running with two people, Lucas Cole and Rebecca Lazarus, because we think that we need that critical mass to make those changes that need to be done. So I hope you vote for me and vote for us in November, and thank you very much again.
Thank you. Ms. Lazarus.
Yes, thank you for allowing us to come here tonight. It's been very interesting. I hope you vote for me because I'm not a career politician. I'm here to I've seen some things, and I see a growing dissatisfaction in our teachers. Our teachers are our best asset in our district, and we need to listen to them. We need to empower them to make decisions, critical classroom decisions, to educate and to make a connection to our children. Make sure that they have those positive school memories that they can take with them for the rest of their lives. I'd like to, as a board member, I'd like to actually sit and work with Dr. Swift to figure out. I think she does a great job. I think she's tireless in her duties as superintendent, but I feel like the board needs to give her some directive as to how they want the school district to run. So I'm stepping up. I hope other people in coming elections will also step up, because I think we need to have unique and very fresh perspectives come to the board, so we have different opinions of how to run the school and make it the best in the community.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to thank you as well for this experience. It's been really interesting. I'm running for school board because I feel like I bring a unique perspective as being an educational policy person. I would like there to be research-based policy that we are then continuing to check the data on. We have ongoing problems like the achievement gap and the school to prison pipeline. And we don't always keep up with trying to see whether we're making a dent in those problems and improving them from time to time. I think it's extremely important. One of the reasons that I got involved is that I went to school board meetings and I saw some level of anger and upset between teachers and parents. And I think that it's important that we include all stakeholders in decision making. I've been on the policy committee trying to decide whether we're going to do later school start times. I think it's really helpful for the board to direct those committees by giving them deadlines, by giving them deliverables, because those can go on and on without really taking seriously the experts, the parents, the teachers who are in the room. They don't become working meetings anymore. So I'm running for school board because I think I bring a diverse perspective that nobody else brings. My name is Suzanne Perkins, and I hope you vote for me.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
I already went.
Oh, sorry.
The league
I made one mistake the last time too, so I was like one mistake here. Sorry, get 2 times.
The league thanks the candidates for participating in tonight's forum, to those who contribute questions, and to CTN for making the program possible. These forums will be rebroadcast on Channel 17 a number of times between now and the election. They are also available on demand for streaming on your computer or smartphone. Go to our website, lwvannarbor.org, and look for the link to the programs. And please urge your friends and fellow residents to watch these forums too. For additional nonpartisan information on candidates and ballot issues, go to vote411.org, the League's voter resource guide covering local, state, and federal candidates and the current proposals that will appear on your ballot. And please don't forget to vote November 6th. Thank you.